NORSCA warfare. And then those sails appeared on the horizon, white but dripping with the bloody symbols of their foul gods. And then came the black wood of their boats, dragged through the froth by tireless muscled arms pulling on 100 oars. I rang the warning bell from my lookout, and me lads formed up, each one sweating at the arrival of these beasts. The crossbowmen loosed bolt after bolt, and many fell, but still the howling fiends ran up the beaches with no care for armour or shields. They looked like rabble, but fought like demons, crashing through our lines, butchering men left and right, clubbing limbs into gore and hacking heads from bodies like they were attached with butter. I'll never forget that morning. An account transcribed from an Ostland sergeant in 2517 IC. The Norscans have a wholly deserved reputation for being incredible fighters. Thick-set and incredibly muscular, they all possess an unquenchable battle thirst, though not through any blight of their souls, but rather as a product of the world in which they live. Their homeland is a haunted waste, infested with terrifying beasts such as chaos spawn and trolls, infused with the very essence of chaos and lashed by furious freezing winds. Their gods are terrifying idols of darkness who favor only the strong and demand the destruction of the weak. To their east are the bloodthirsty horse nomads. To their south are the heirs of Sigmar, and to their north the very abode of their gods. NORSCA is a land where living even a single day is a victory. Thus are the Norscans inured to violence and horror from an early age, and there are few among their numbers unprepared to fight and die for their honor, gain, or for the favor of the ruinous powers. Comparing the men of NORSCA unto the soft-bellied wastrels of the south is to compare a wolf to a sheep. For where the men of the south would cower secure behind their high walls, the men of NORSCA roam the far corners of the world in search of adventure and plunder. Where the men of the Empire indulge themselves before a fireplace, glutting on fine wine and cheese, the men of the North must hunt and kill for their daily bread, and rip into raw meat with their bare hands and teeth for their efforts. Where the men of the South complain bitterly of travelling abroad in fog or sleet, the Norse brave howling blizzards, clad in little more than flea-infested scraps of fur. Little wonder then that the raids of the Northmen are feared throughout the old world. The conditions of their environment and the savage strictures of their faith have molded them into a true warrior race. Each Northman towers over any man of the Empire. Their powerful bodies hardened by lives of ceaseless toil and endless war. The Norsemen fight for their very survival from birth, and every man is expected, nay, demanded, to be an accomplished warrior, hardy, fierce, and, most of all, independent. The Norsemen have no inclination for the ways of the plowshare or sickle. Their tools are the sword, axe, and shield, and that which their own lands cannot provide for them, they merely take from the lands of lesser men. Their legendary strength and endurance has been built by centuries of living in a land that does not tolerate weakness, and has been further enhanced and strengthened by the corrupting influence of chaos that inevitably affects all those who live so close to the chaos wastes. The largest form of organization for the Norscan warriors is known as a freigatur, a free gathering in the common tongue, when the champions of NORSCA bring their tribes and warbands together in a common cause, usually for a massive invasion of the Imperial or Kurgan lands, or in order to defend their own tribes from invaders. It is a time for warriors to meet and feast and swear oaths of blood and glory for when they stand together in battle, and for their chieftains to meet in conference with one another aboard the deck of the dragon ship of he who has called the meeting, to plan cunning strategies to fell their enemies. These convocations allow for a massive raising of forces, comprising of thousands of blood-hungry chaos tribesmen. Its unity, however, is never truly certain, for it depends upon the strength and iron will of its leaders, as well as the promise of victory and the wealth for its warriors. The next largest organization of warriors is the warband itself, or the war herd as it is called in the Norscan tongue. Most folk in the northern reaches of the Empire and Kislev are likely well acquainted with the common Norse warband. Brutal reavers either charging down the Kislevite steppes or leaping fur-clad from longships to savage the coastlines. The Norse warherds comprise the bulk of the Chaos Hordes, alongside the warrior bands of the Kurgan and Hung. In times of war, the Norsemen flock to the banners of the great champions, throwing their weight behind the cause, whether it be the favor of the gods or the blight lure of plundered gold. When not part of a great army, the Norsemen spend their days raiding the towns and villages of the south. Though perceived as a single, mindless horde of heathen warriors bent on rape and slaughter by the peoples of the south, the Norseman bands are often wildly distinct in terms of tactics, appearance, and chaos allegiance. Some warbands are characterized by only using axes in battle, others by only armoring their fronts so that they cannot retreat from the battlefield, while others by a particular style of beard. Regardless, the fact remains that any Norse warherd is invariably comprised of mighty, hardened warriors of superlative skill and deadliness, hardened by a bleak land and bred for battle. They hold all others in contempt and hatred. Though NORSCAns recognize no authority except that which they pledge freely to their warlords and champions, and even this can evaporate quickly if they are defeated or if the Lord shows any sort of weakness. There exists a barbaric sort of brotherhood between the warriors of Norse marauder bands. Bonds so strong as to endure even as the warband divides or grows. These bonds may be rooted in tribal bloodlines or be forged in the fires of battle, but are regardless impossible to break and allows the Marauders extensive battlefield cohesion and discipline that belies their savage mien. The NORSCAns are a semi-nomadic race. Although many Norse tribes live the year round in primitive villages from which they set sail to terrorize the known world, other tribes wander the north, erecting their temporary villages near sacred sites of ruinous favor where they might catch the favor of their malefic masters. Despite this, the Norse are still the most settled of Chaos Marauders, at least with respect to the ever-roving Kurgan horse tribes of the eastern steppes. As a result of this, the Norse alone have developed the means to manufacture weapons and armor of superior craftsmanship among the northern peoples. Thus are the Northmen most likely to be clad in armor of steel and wielding mighty blades honed to razor-sharp deadliness, making them far more formidable on the battlefield than the Kurgan or Hung. Such is the Norscan respect for steel that among warbands of Norse Chaos warriors there exists the tradition of the Mound of Blades, a collection of infernal weaponry, some plundered from Southlanders, some fashioned by Norse hellsmiths. To take a weapon from the Mound of Blades, a Chaos warrior must first place another upon it. The offered weapon cannot be his own. It must be taken from the corpse of a sworn foe. The rare few who forswear this custom discover at their cost that this is one tradition that the Chaos Gods seem to appreciate. Among larger tribal warbands, there are also Chaos Reliquaries, unholy stores of a warband's most treasured weapons. It is true that the champions keep their most prized accoutrements on their person at all times, but for those lucky enough to acquire a fine blade or ensorcelled axe, a reliquary will keep it safe from rivals. In battle, the Norscans invoke the war god Khorne, from the lowliest marauder to the highest chosen, provided he is not a worshipper of Slanesh, of course. By bellowing and roaring his dark name, the Norsemen believe that they can drive themselves into an uncontrollable battle fury. Whether by their own will or that of Khorne himself, who can say? The blood-crazed cornet berserkers of NORSCA are truly fearsome opponents, and many thousands have been undone by their psychotic, blood-lusting fury. When set loose on the battlefield, each marauder is like a beast scenting blood, and they will not rest until their lust for death is sated. For they know that the eyes of the gods are upon them, judging their strength and testing their courage. They also know that those who fight well will be honored by the gods, and will receive their blessings and the marks of their favor. And so they fight with no regard for their own lives, only for how many they can take on the battlefield. Death, after all, is the destiny of all, and so the Norse do not court it like the weak men of the south, but rather embrace it. A bloody end with blade in hand, and the red ruin of their foes strewn all about them, an end to make both gods and ancestors proud. The men of the north fear dishonor more than the touch of the Valkyrie. The armies of NORSCA are feared and renowned for their sheer ferocity and the strength of their infantry, comprised chiefly of merciless marauders and bloodthirsty iron-clad chaos warriors, favoring the battle axe, heavy flail, and violent exaltation of melee combat over any sort of tactical nuance or stealth. Due to the heavy prevalence of cornet worship amongst the Norse, the use of ranged weaponry and subtlety are decried as the weapons of cowards, and as cowards are seen as being below the scrutiny of the dark gods, many Norsemen prefer the fury of close quarters and are given to acts of suicidal bravery and barbaric heroism, that they may attract the attention of their deities and thus receive the blessings they so crave. Norskans generally field very little cavalry, for the icy mountainous landscape of NORSCA is even less conducive to horses than the barren Kurgan steppelands to the east. Added to this is the fact that most Norse tribes tend to look upon horses with a fair bit of ambivalence, seeing mounts as uncertain investments at best and dangerous liabilities at worst. However, groups of mounted Chaos Knights are not overly uncommon, and indeed an armor-clad warhorse is considered the provenance of a great warrior or jarl among many Norse tribes. However, due to the extensive contacts with the Kurgan and Hung tribes, the Norsemen have begun to slowly but surely accrue horses, either through trade or by stealing them in raids upon the eastern Chaos marauders, as not even the sturdy steppe ponies of the Kurgan steppes are equipped enough to survive here. Some Norse tribes have begun breeding their own horses, snorting, savage beasts who, having been born so close to the realm of chaos, eschew grain and grass to be fed on the diet of human flesh and diluted blood, corralled in crude shillings in order to shelter them from the worst of the ice storms. Norskans are expert hunters. Taking their steeds from corrals, they travel the length and breadth of the land, crossing immense frozen glaciers and endless tundras with mighty axes in hand, searching for terrible beasts and mighty foes to slay in tribute to the dark powers. In battle, the speed and mobility of marauder horsemen leaves even the most able cavalrymen of the old world sorely lacking. Able to steer their steeds with the subtlest of movements of the waist and knees, the tribesmen have both hands free to wield wicked blades and hooked axes. Many Norse horsemen favor throwing axes and javelins, while others prefer wicked barbed flails that catch their enemy, dragging them behind their horse until their bodies come apart in a welter of blood. Some Norse tribes, such as the Vargs, have also tamed the titanic mammoths of the northern wastes, using them as gargantuan beasts of war and living siege engines. Most terrible of these creatures are those who have been twisted and mutated by the influences of chaos, transforming them into insane, hate-filled beasts that await the chance to vent their suffering upon others. Though the favored tactic of many a Norse warband is to simply charge across the battlefield and close the distance with their enemy, getting to grips with them in melee where their superior strength and martial skill will see them to victory. The Norskans are highly skilled at many other forms of warfare. One particularly ubiquitous formation amongst the Norsemen is the boar's head, or the swine's head, a wedge formation where the warriors lock their thick shields together to protect themselves from enemy fire. Like the jaws of some great beast, the serrated ranks of the phalanx charges forth, getting to grips with the foe, where the Norskans then cut them down with vicious abandon. The indomitable shield wall is another mainstay of Norscan military tactics, and arguably one of the most ancient, as it stretches back to the days of the Norse raiders. Similar to the boar's head, the shield wall is a flexible military formation capable of defending a Norscan warband from even the heaviest of projectile fire, and blunt the force of even the most devastating charge. Only the most brutal and savage Norse warriors are allowed to take the first row of the shield wall, for it is a hellish place where only the greatest of warriors can triumph. The end.